After two failed referendums, first at $85.6 million, then at $77.4 million, Ridgefield is considering a third attempt at new public safety facilities. The question before the town is not simply architectural or operational. It is fundamentally about priorities, trust, and how voters weigh one major capital project against many others that are waiting just around the corner. What follows are two sharply different perspectives offered at a public hearing. One argues that voters are rationally weighing competing obligations. The other argues that such comparisons are misguided, even illegitimate. Understanding that difference may determine whether a third referendum succeeds or fails again. One view starts from the premise that the last two referendums already told us something important. Not that Ridgefield is unwilling to invest, but that it is unwilling to overcommit.
The thing that we learned from these two referendums is that Ridgefield can do anything. It just can't do everything.
This argument rests on a simple but uncomfortable reality. Property taxes are the primary funding mechanism, and they fall hardest on those least able to absorb them.
Property taxes, a lot of people don't realize this. I know everybody on this board, I think, is pretty progressive. But property taxes are the most regressive taxes paid by Connecticut taxpayers. That means they correlate negatively to the ability of people to pay property taxes. So property taxes are evil because they're regressive. But sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes they're a necessary evil, okay? And as long as they're a necessary evil, then that's fine. But whenever you're doing something that spends a nickel or a dime that you don't need to spend, it's an unnecessary evil.
From that perspective, voters weren't rejecting public safety. They were reacting to scale and to what might come next. Carr points out that public safety does not exist in a fiscal vacuum.
We've got 1 million square feet of space in our schools that are on average about this is the weighted average, 28 years since they were last refurbished. They are in not need of refurbishment. So if you spend $100 or $150 for 1 million square feet of space, that's $100 or $150 million.
In that light, the concern voters expressed wasn't fear, it was triage.
This committee needs to look at everything, not just the cost of the schools, not just the cost of the police and the fire, but also what all of this is going to cost, because as I said in the beginning, Ridgefield can do anything. It can't do everything.
The first selectman sees the issue very differently.
We shouldn't be competing against one another for dollars, whether it's a police department, a fire department, schools, an auditorium, and there are a multitude of other things that we're going to be addressing as the years go on, probably future boards of select persons.
From this perspective, treating projects as competitors risks fracturing the community and undermining long-term planning.
But it's not the schools versus the PDFD. And that, under the radar, was going on quite a bit, I think, in our community.
Ironically, the argument against competition is paired with an acknowledgement of how many expensive obligations lie ahead.
There are other issues, by the way, that are going to be coming forward, not just this, not just the schools, open space. If we have opportunities to purchase tracts of open space, do we do that? How do we address the housing issue that we are going to be under state statute required to comply with? How are we going to do that? We have a lot of issues that are going to be coming down the street that we're going to have to meet as a community. And how are we going to do that? And again, it's not just this project, it's not just the schools, it's not just open space, and everyone has their area of interest. Could be recreation. Do we need more fields? Do we need to convert some to synthetic? That's all millions of dollars.
Yet the conclusion is not that voters should weigh these collectively, but that each proposal should stand on its own. Here is the tension Ridgefield must confront before a third referendum. Voters are being asked to approve a single priority, while fully aware that many others are coming. Ignoring that awareness does not make it disappear. One approach treats voter concern about cumulative cost as a misunderstanding to be corrected. The other treats it as a rational judgment that must be addressed. The most striking moment in these comments may be this. The first selectman openly acknowledges that many voters were weighing future tax pressures, pressures he says he is already aware of. Yet his advice to the committee is not to confront those concerns, but to set them aside. That raises an unavoidable question. Why hold public hearings at all, if the most persistent concern raised by taxpayers is deemed illegitimate? Finite resources do not become infinite by refusing to compare them, and taxpayer fatigue, public sensibility, and voter resistance do not disappear simply because leaders wish they weren't factors. Ridgefield has already tested this approach twice. Each time, voters said no, not because they rejected public safety, but because they did the math. To proceed again while disregarding the very concerns that defeated the last two referendums is not optimism, it is a gamble. And the risk is not abstract. A third failure would not just delay a solution, it would erode confidence, harden skepticism, and make every future capital project harder. Schools, housing compliance, recreation, open space, all of it. There's an wise saying, less worn than the usual cliché. You can ignore gravity for a while, but you can't repeal it. Ridgefield's gravity is fiscal reality, and a voting public that understands it. The committee now faces a choice. Learn from what voters have already told the town, or test, once again, whether ignoring that message will somehow produce a different result.